Far away in the quiet stretches of the galaxy, there was a council of many alien civilizations. They were old, wise, and proud of their long history among the stars. For generations, they had traveled between worlds, meeting new species, sharing knowledge, and guiding those who seemed ready for the larger community of space. They had seen strange creatures before, peaceful beings who grew among gentle planets, fragile ones who lived under calm skies, and delicate thinkers who spent centuries building harmony before daring to cross the void. When they discovered the little blue planet circling a yellow sun, most of them thought it would be the same. From their distant sensors, it looked like a quiet world, covered with oceans, green lands, clouds drifting across the sky. It seemed beautiful, alive, and promising. They sent probes closer, and signals began to pour in. Strange voices, strange languages, bursts of sound and light that were not natural at all. The planet had a species, and that species was trying to speak to the stars. The council was excited. For them, this was always a special moment. To find someone new, to meet minds that had never seen the wider galaxy. They imagined fragile but hopeful creatures full of curiosity, looking up at the sky with wonder. They imagined themselves stepping in as mentors, perhaps even protectors, showing the way. No one thought much about the planet itself. No one gave attention to its storms, its earthquakes, or the strange history written into its rocks. They only saw the beauty from afar and thought, surely those who live there are gentle dreamers. The first teams of observers arrived quietly, ships hiding far above the atmosphere. They began to study. They listened to broadcasts, intercepted signals, watched the surface with patient eyes. What they found at first was confusing. The species below seemed endlessly restless. They built machines, but they also destroyed them. They grew food, yet often let some of their own go hungry. They spoke of peace, yet their history was full of conflict. The observers struggled to understand. Perhaps, one of them suggested, they are still young. Still learning, others agreed. That was common. Many species stumbled before they rose. The important thing, they thought, was that these beings had reached for the stars at all. They were building rockets, sending machines beyond their world, whispering to the sky with radio signals. That alone made them worthy of contact. So the council prepared to introduce themselves. But even then, in the middle of all this excitement, a quiet group within the council raised doubts. They looked at the reports more carefully. They saw something different. They saw that this world was not like the others they knew. It was rougher, harsher. Life there seemed to survive against constant danger. The planet spun with violent storms, burned with deserts, froze with glaciers, and shook with quakes. It was full of sharp-toothed predators, poisonous plants, diseases that spread quickly and often killed without mercy. And yet somehow, the creatures there not only survived, they thrived. They spread into every corner of the world, building homes in deserts, on mountains, in icy lands, even out at sea. They carried with them not only their tools, but their stubborn will to live. That was unusual. That was not like the peaceful species the council usually met. Still, most of the leaders dismissed the concern. If they were truly dangerous, one said, they would have destroyed themselves long ago. When the time finally came for first contact, the decision was made to approach gently. A single ship would move close enough to be noticed, to let the beings know they were not alone. It was supposed to be a historic moment, a day of joy. The ship appeared in the night sky high above the clouds, bright enough to be seen from the surface. On Earth, people looked up, pointing, taking pictures, sending messages to each other in shock and excitement. News spread in every direction. Something was there, something not human, something waiting. From the ship, the alien crew watched carefully. They expected fear. That was natural. Almost every new species reacted that way at first. Some tried to hide, some froze in awe, some prayed to the sky. Fear was the oldest and most common response, but the humans were not afraid. They were shocked, yes. They were loud, yes. But alongside the fear, there was something else. Curiosity, energy, boldness. Instead of hiding, they gathered under the sky in crowds. Instead of silence, they shouted questions into cameras, sent messages into the night, some even joking and laughing. And where others would have bowed, these humans stood straight and spoke as if to equals. The aliens were unsettled. This was not what they had prepared for. They had expected fragile dreamers. Instead, they saw restless survivors. For the first time, the council wondered if they had underestimated what this species truly was. The aliens did not rush to meet the new species. Instead, they decided to watch more closely. Their ships floated high above the planet, hidden from human eyes, their sensors gathering every detail. For weeks, months, and then years they observed. They wanted to understand what kind of people lived on this strange world. At first, it was simple things they noticed. The humans walked upright, their bodies built in a way that looked both fragile and strong. They did not have claws or sharp teeth like many hunters the aliens knew. Their skin was soft, without armor or scales. Their eyes were small compared to the vast creatures of other planets. From a distance, humans seemed vulnerable, like a species that should have been easy prey. But when the observers watched more carefully, the picture began to change. These beings did not need natural weapons because they built their own. They shaped metal, stone, fire, and later machines, turning weakness into power. Every time they lacked something, they found a way to create it. When the cold of winter threatened them, they learned to weave cloth and build fire. When wild animals attacked, they built walls, sharpened sticks, and later forged tools harder than bone. When hunger came, they grew food from the ground itself and carried it across oceans. The aliens were unsettled. This was not weakness. This was adaptability. This was survival of a kind they had rarely seen. They turned their sensors toward the planet itself. What kind of place had shaped such a people? What they saw shocked them even more. The world was dangerous in ways few other council members could even imagine. It had heavy gravity compared to most habitable planets, pulling at every muscle and bone. Its climate was unstable, with seasons of heat and cold, storms that ripped apart entire regions, deserts of burning sand, and frozen wastelands where nothing easy survived. The seas boiled with storms, the land shook with earthquakes, mountains spewed fire from inside the planet itself. Yet humans lived everywhere, not only in the calm valleys or fertile plains, but on snowy mountains, inside thick jungles, across burning deserts, and even floating on the waves of the endless sea. Where other species would choose one safe niche, humans refused to be limited. They spread, learned, and adjusted. No matter the challenge, they adapted. The council analysts began to keep lists of everything dangerous about Earth. They wrote down diseases that could sweep across cities. They counted poisonous plants and biting insects. They measured predators with teeth larger than a human head. The list kept growing until it filled entire reports. And still, despite all these dangers, the humans were not only alive, they were thriving in billions. Some of the alien scholars began to whisper a new word among themselves. Deathworld. That was what they called planets like this. Worlds that should kill any fragile species before it even had a chance to stand. Places too violent, too cruel, too unstable for long-term survival. Normally, nothing intelligent ever rose from such places. The conditions were simply too harsh. But Earth was a death world, and humans were its children. This thought unsettled the council. For a long time, they had believed that intelligence came from peace, from slow and gentle growth. The other civilizations they had met all came from calm planets where food was plenty, climates were soft, and predators were few. On such planets, life had the time to think, to dream, to build. Those were the kinds of species who joined the council. But here was something different. Here was a species forged in fire and storm, raised against predators and disease, forced to fight for every generation. Their intelligence had not been born of peace, it had been born of survival. And that made them unpredictable. The aliens continued to watch daily life on Earth. They tuned into broadcasts, followed human inventions, studied their science, art, and habits. The contradictions were endless. One day they saw humans sending machines to other planets, building rockets and telescopes to explore the sky. The next day they saw them fighting over borders or resources or ideas. They cared deeply for their families, yet sometimes hurt their own kind in disputes. They sang songs of peace while building weapons. They dreamed of unity while dividing themselves into countless groups. To the council, this was confusing. Most species followed clearer paths, but humans seemed to carry everything at once: kindness and cruelty, wisdom and foolishness, creativity and destruction. They were like a storm contained inside fragile bodies, and yet in their daily lives there was also something simple and touching. Observers saw humans laughing together, helping strangers, building homes with their own hands, planting seeds for future harvests. They watched them risk themselves for their children, care for their elders, gather in groups to share food and stories. There was something warm in them, something that could not be explained only by survival. The council meetings grew more heated as the reports came in. Some members said these humans could never be trusted. They lived on a death world. They were shaped by danger, and that made them dangerous too. Others argued that the very fact they had survived so much made them strong allies, people who might bring new ideas and resilience to the galaxy. Still, the humans themselves remained unaware. They looked up at the stars, sending radio waves into the sky, dreaming of life beyond their world. They imagined they were alone, reaching out into the dark. They did not know that eyes were already watching, silently taking notes, silently debating their future. One particular report caught everyone's attention. It described a test. Some scientists among the council had compared human biology to that of other known species. They were shocked at what they found. Humans could survive in temperatures that would kill many others. They could lose blood and still recover. Their bones broke but healed stronger. They carried scars but kept moving forward. And perhaps strangest of all, they could push themselves beyond normal limits simply through willpower. When their bodies should have failed, sometimes they refused to stop. It was unlike anything the council had seen. It frightened them in a quiet way, because willpower was not something you could measure, not something you could predict. The whispers of Deathworlders grew louder, and while some still held on to the dream of peaceful guidance, others began to fear that bringing humans into the galactic community might change everything. But there was no turning back. The humans had already reached for the stars, already sent their first machines into space. Sooner or later they would step beyond their world, and when that happened, the galaxy would have to face them, ready or not. And so the council continued to observe. They tried to prepare. But deep inside, a single question haunted them all. What happens when the Deathworlders finally emerge? The day of meeting finally arrived. After years of silent watching, the Council of Civilizations agreed it was time to reveal themselves. They had studied enough, debated enough, and prepared enough. Humanity was no longer a mystery. It was a risk, yes, but also a chance. The Council decided to step forward and introduce themselves, hoping that perhaps this strange species from the Death World could learn to walk with them in peace. The first ship chosen for contact was not large or frightening. It was sleek, bright, and calm, built to inspire trust rather than fear. Its surface glowed like polished silver as it drifted down through the black of space. On Earth, people noticed it almost immediately. Some saw it as a star brighter than the others, moving slowly across the sky. Others pointed their cameras upward, capturing the image of something that could not be mistaken for anything natural. News spread in minutes. Every screen, every channel, every conversation turned to the same question. What was that? Governments scrambled, scientists rushed to their telescopes, and ordinary people crowded into open fields, staring into the night. The world held its breath together, and then the ship lowered itself further. Light shimmered across its surface as though it were alive. It stopped high above the atmosphere, where it could be seen but not reached. It was not threatening, not aggressive, only present, almost like an invitation. Inside the ship, the alien crew waited. They had practiced this moment again and again. They expected fear. Fear was natural. They imagined humans running for shelter, falling silent in awe or breaking into chaos. That was how most young species reacted. Fear first, then curiosity, then, if guided carefully, trust. But the humans did not act that way. Of course, there was fear at first. The sudden presence of something from the stars was overwhelming. But soon something else took over. Curiosity, boldness, energy. Where other species hid, humans gathered. Where others whispered, humans shouted. They climbed to rooftops, gathered in stadiums, filled the streets, pointing and cheering as if they were greeting visitors rather than intruders. Some laughed, some waved at the sky, and some even joked to cameras as though this moment of history was also a moment of play. The aliens were stunned. They had not prepared for this. They had prepared to calm fear, not to answer boldness. A signal was sent down, a simple greeting, translated into dozens of human languages, projected across the radio spectrum. It said, in essence, "We are here. We come in peace. We wish to meet you." The reply came almost instantly, and it was not what the council had expected. Instead of silence or confusion, humans replied with their own greetings, not fearful but curious, not desperate but determined. They sent back questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why are you here? And they asked these questions not as children asking a parent, but as equals speaking across a table. The council chamber far away on another world filled with unease. They had planned to guide, to teach, to uplift, but the tone of these humans was different. They were not asking for guidance. They were asking for partnership. The first small meeting took place days later. The ship lowered closer, stopping above a calm stretch of land chosen for safety. From it came a smaller vessel, glowing softly, carrying only a handful of representatives. They touched down gently, and for the first time in history, humans and aliens stood face to face. The air was thick with silence at first. The aliens expected hesitation, perhaps trembling hands or wide, fearful eyes. Instead, the humans stepped forward with steady movements. They looked, they studied, they listened, and then one of them simply extended a hand, a gesture of greeting so simple, so ordinary for them, yet so startling to the aliens. The gesture said something words never could. "We are not afraid of you." The meeting went on, and the aliens began to notice things that unsettled them even more. The humans asked difficult questions, not out of hostility but out of a deep desire to know. They wanted to understand how the council worked, how many civilizations there were, what kind of challenges existed beyond the stars. They listened, yes, but they also pressed back, offering their own ideas, their own thoughts, their own vision of what could be. To the aliens, it was both fascinating and troubling. Most young species listened quietly, nodding, accepting whatever was told. But these humans argued. They negotiated. They asked for proof. They wanted respect. The observers watching from orbit noted every detail. They recorded how humans stood even under pressure, how their bodies seemed to carry a hidden strength, how their expressions never showed submission. This was not arrogance. It was survival, carried like an instinct, written into every part of them. The council grew divided again. Some whispered that perhaps the humans were too bold, too strong-willed. Others argued that such strength was exactly what the galaxy needed. Still, one fact became clear. Humans were not fragile dreamers to be guided. They were survivors. Survivors of a world that tried every day to kill them. Survivors who looked at the stars not with fear but with determination. The turning point came during a demonstration. The aliens, trying to show their own technology, invited the humans to witness environments far harsher than Earth, chambers of heat, cold, and pressure. These were meant to impress, to prove how advanced the Council's civilizations were, how carefully they had mastered the elements. But the humans surprised them again. Conditions that should have been overwhelming were not so unusual for them. Cold that froze others reminded them of their own winters. Heat that scorched others made them think of deserts where their ancestors had lived. Pressure that crushed others was not unlike the deep oceans they had already explored. They stood in those chambers, and though they were challenged, they did not collapse. The aliens looked at one another in silence. What was meant to impress had instead revealed the truth. The humans were tougher than most of them. Word spread quickly across the galaxy. Stories of the meeting traveled faster than ships. Whispers of Deathworlders turned into open conversations. For the first time, the galaxy realized that these beings from Earth were not to be underestimated. The humans themselves did not know the full impact yet. For them, it was only the beginning. A first handshake, a first conversation, a first step into a larger universe. They did not see the fear growing quietly among the stars, nor the respect forming in equal measure. All they knew was that they had finally met someone out there, and they were ready to walk forward, not as students waiting for teachers, but as equals determined to find their place among the stars. And for the first time, the Council realized something they had never felt before. The galaxy would never be the same now that the Deathworlders had arrived. The galaxy had always believed in balance. Civilizations rose, met each other, and slowly built connections. Most of them came from soft worlds, planets where life had grown gently. They had found comfort in peace, and over time, peace became the rule of the Council. But with the arrival of humans, cracks began to show in that belief. At first, many aliens hoped the humans would fit quietly into the system. They would learn the rules, follow traditions, and become another voice in the great circle of civilizations. But soon a test came that changed everything. It began with a misunderstanding. Not every alien faction was comfortable with humans joining the wider community. Some saw them as too wild, too bold, too unshaped. They worried that humans would bring instability, or worse, challenge the old ways that had lasted for centuries. So one faction decided to test them in secret. They placed the humans in situations that were meant to push them beyond their limits. Environments colder than their own polar regions, hotter than their deserts, with air thinner than their highest mountains. It was supposed to show the council that humans could not endure everything, that they still needed guidance and control. But what happened was the opposite. The humans struggled, yes. Their breath grew heavy, their movements slowed, their bodies shook, but they did not stop. They adapted. They found ways to push forward, to use every scrap of energy, to change their rhythm, to survive longer than any species the council had seen before. And when they were told the test was over, they still stood, battered but unbroken, looking directly at their examiners with the quiet defiance of those who refused to yield. The aliens watching were stunned. For them, survival meant perfection, using the right tools, the right conditions, the right environment. For humans, survival meant something different. It meant refusing to give up even when everything else said they should. One observer in a private note wrote, "They do not know when to stop, and perhaps that is why they are still alive." News spread quickly. In hushed voices across the council halls, the word Deathworlder was no longer a whisper. It became a truth everyone accepted. These humans had grown on a world designed to crush life, and instead of being crushed, they had grown stronger. More demonstrations followed, some official, some accidental. In one, humans faced toxins that should have ended them, but they resisted longer than anyone expected. In another, they showed how their bodies could heal from wounds that other species would consider permanent. And in yet another, they revealed their strange ability to keep moving through pain, through exhaustion, through sheer will. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, but it wasn't only their bodies that shocked the council. It was their minds. Humans did not think like others. They were restless, always asking questions, always searching for new ways to solve problems. Where other species accepted limits, humans looked for ways around them. If a door was locked, they built a key. If the key did not work, they broke the door. If breaking the door was impossible, they dug a tunnel beneath the wall. And if the wall was too deep, they found another path altogether. To them, obstacles were not the end. They were simply puzzles waiting for solutions. This way of thinking frightened some and inspired others. It meant humans could not be controlled easily. It meant they would always find a way forward no matter what. The revelation came fully during a council gathering. Representatives from dozens of worlds sat together, discussing the question: should humans be welcomed as equals, or should they be limited, guided, kept under watch? Many voices argued against them. They said the Deathworlders were too unpredictable, too dangerous. They said their resilience was not a gift, but a threat. Then a human stood and spoke. Not with anger, not with arrogance, but with steady honesty. They told the story of their own world, how their species had grown under storms, fought hunger, healed from sickness, survived disasters again and again. They explained that every human carried the memory of struggle, and with that struggle, the strength to stand again after every fall. And then came the words that changed the chamber. We are not dangerous because we come from a hard world. We are dangerous only if you try to take from us the right to stand as equals. The chamber fell silent. It was not a threat, not a boast, but a truth spoken so simply that none could deny it. After that day, the galaxy saw humans differently. Some still feared them, but even those who feared them respected them. They were no longer newcomers asking to be let in. They were no longer a curiosity from a strange blue planet. They were a force, quiet, stubborn, unyielding. And with every new test, every new encounter, that truth grew clearer. A small story spread among the council worlds, told again and again in different ways. It said that when a human climbs a mountain, they do not stop at the halfway point, even when the air grows thin and the rocks cut their skin. They keep climbing, even if their body screams in pain, because for them, reaching the top is not about comfort. It is about proving that they can. That, the story said, is what it means to be from a death world. The revelation was complete. The galaxy understood now. Humans were not shaped by ease or safety. They were shaped by hardship. And that made them more enduring than anyone had expected. Some members of the council worried about what would come next. They whispered that perhaps inviting humans into the community was dangerous, that perhaps the galaxy was safer before they arrived, but others argued that nothing could stop them anyway. If not today, then tomorrow. If not with welcome, then on their own. Because Deathworlders did not wait for permission. They simply endured until the door opened, or until they broke it down. From that moment on, no one underestimated them again. The galaxy had learned a truth it would never forget. Where others faltered, humans endured. Where others broke, humans bent and stood again. Where others gave up, humans pushed forward. One step more, one breath more, one heartbeat more. And in that endurance, the galaxy saw both its greatest fear and its greatest hope. Because if humans could survive their own death world, perhaps they could survive anything. And perhaps in their survival they might teach the galaxy how to endure as well. The galaxy had changed. Even those who wished to deny it could not hide from the truth anymore. The humans had arrived, and with them, something new had entered the ancient halls of the council. They were not like the others, not quiet dreamers from soft planets, not delicate thinkers shaped by peace. They were children of storms, forged on a world that tested them every single day, and now they stood among the stars. For a while, many civilizations tried to carry on as before, as though nothing had shifted. They continued their debates, their old traditions, their careful diplomacy. But whenever the subject of humanity rose, the air in the chambers grew heavier. Some voices spoke of danger, warning that humans could not be controlled. Others argued that such strength was exactly what the galaxy needed in times of crisis. But behind every word, one truth was clear. Nothing would ever return to the way it was. The humans themselves did not come demanding power. They did not arrive with armies or with ultimatums. They arrived with questions, with hands ready to work, with eyes hungry to see. Yet in every conversation, in every meeting, there was something in their tone that unsettled the old council members. They did not ask for permission. They asked for partnership. They did not bow their heads. They met every gaze with steady eyes as though they already belonged. It was not arrogance. It was survival turned into confidence. A species that had survived hunger, fire, flood, and storm had no reason to see themselves as lesser. They had already faced worse than silence from the stars. They had already lived through nights colder than any council hall, and days hotter than any desert world. What was there left to fear? The turning point came quietly, almost by accident. A crisis struck a distant colony, one belonging to another civilization. The colony was small but precious, with people trapped in a sudden natural disaster. Rescue ships from the council rushed, but they hesitated at the edge of the danger zone, calculating risks, waiting for the safest possible plan. The humans did not wait. With ships still new to interstellar travel, with technology still less polished than the others, they went straight in. They pushed through storms of rock and fire, through dangers that other captains marked as impossible. They reached the colony, pulled strangers into their craft, carried them back to safety. And when they finally returned, scarred and exhausted, they stood not as heroes seeking applause, but as people who had done what they felt was necessary. The council could not ignore it. Whispers spread from one world to another. The Deathworlders had saved lives when others held back. They had endured risk where others calculated loss, and in that single act, their place was no longer a question. It was a fact. From then on, the way others spoke of humans changed. Once they were the newcomers, now the fragile ones on the mystery. Now, they were the Deathworlders, and the word was not spoken as an insult but as a warning, a title, and in some places even a sign of respect. Stories grew around them. Some were true, some exaggerated, but all carried the same theme, that humans were unbreakable. That when others surrendered, humans kept fighting. That when others fell, humans stood again. That when others saw the end, humans saw a way forward. In markets on distant planets, merchants told tales of how a human traveler walked through storms without complaint. In council chambers, diplomats recalled how a human argued for hours without tiring, wearing down their opponents not with threats, but with sheer determination. In training halls, younger species whispered about how humans could push their bodies beyond normal limits, running farther, climbing higher, holding on longer than anyone expected. And slowly, the galaxy began to change with them. Civilizations that once saw danger began to see opportunity. They realized that perhaps these Deathworlders carried something valuable, something the softer worlds had forgotten: resilience, endurance, the ability to survive even when everything else said survival was impossible. Humans began to work side by side with others, not as students but as equals. They built, they shared, they learned, and they taught. They did not always understand the delicate customs of other species, but they offered their own simple truths in return. If it's hard, we will endure. If it's dangerous, we will try anyway. If it looks impossible, we'll see what happens when we refuse to quit. Those words spread almost like a philosophy, carried across stars not by preachers or leaders, but by the everyday actions of humans living alongside others. A farmer on one planet who kept working through harsh weather. A miner on another who dug deeper even when others stopped. A scientist who kept testing, failing, and testing again until success came. Little by little, the galaxy began to see the strength of the Deathworlders not as a threat, but as a gift. Of course, fear never vanished completely. Some still whispered that humans might one day turn their strength into conquest, that their willpower, if ever twisted, could make them unstoppable. But even those who feared them admitted one thing: the galaxy could never again imagine itself without them. And the humans? They looked to the stars with the same restless curiosity they had always carried. They did not see themselves as conquerors or saviors. They simply saw new horizons to reach, new challenges to meet, new mountains to climb. To them, space was not the end of the story, but only the next step. In time, whenever a young species asked the council about the humans, the answer became simple, repeated across countless worlds. They come from the death world. They endure what we cannot, and they are among us now. The story of humanity was no longer just a story of Earth. It was the story of how a fragile-looking species from a dangerous planet refused to break, and in refusing, taught the galaxy something it had forgotten: that sometimes the strongest are not those born in safety, but those shaped by struggle. And so, the Deathworlders emerged, not as outcasts, not as threats, but as survivors who had earned their place beneath the stars. The galaxy had expected dreamers, but instead it found a species that could endure, and once they emerged, nothing could send them back into silence again.